Right now on Upfront.
Liberal landslide. Susan Crawford cruises to victory, cementing the state Supreme Court's liberal majority for years to come.
What an amazing victory.
We're going to continue to see a political court that rules in favor of Democrats every single case.
Record spending, the Elon factor, the most expensive state court race in U.S. history.
Sometime when is enough enough?
And now the impact.
The numbers aren't gonna turn around.
The national and statewide implications. With us this Sunday, Democratic National Committee Chairman Ken Martin and Republican U.S. Senator Ron Johnson.
Then the results.
This is a 50-50 state, and tonight was a landslide.
How Crawford ran up the score, inside the map, and Charles Franklin with what it all means.
And countdown to draft day.
That's the most critical responsibility we have.
Just weeks from the NFL draft in Green Bay. Preparations well underway, the major security threats, the millions from the state, and Green Bay's mayor revealing it all just moments away.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. A polarized state Supreme Court, even more so this weekend after Susan Crawford's victory Tuesday night. Crawford, the liberal candidate backed by Democrats, winning the Supreme Court race by 10 points, beating out the conservative and former Republican Attorney General Brad Schimel.
And now the fallout. Democratic National Committee Chairman Ken Martin, Republican Senator Ron Johnson, both standing by for us. The culmination of this unprecedented race. Blanketed by the court's liberal justices, a nod to the partisanship and fractured court, Susan Crawford declared victory Tuesday night, coming off the most expensive judicial race in U.S. history.
I never could have imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world. For justice in Wisconsin, and we won.
The Associated Press calling the race just after 9 p.m. Brad Schimel, who started and ended the night on his bass guitar, conceding. Hours earlier, emboldened by President Trump's endorsement in the final days of the campaign and that of Elon Musk. Musk's high-profile campaign stop in Green Bay and millions spent on a court race in battleground Wisconsin.
Yeah, I've called Judge Crawford and conceded. No. You gotta accept the results.
The implications instantly national.
You think this is a morale booster for the Democrats?
Absolutely.
Democrats say a stunning rebuke to Elon Musk. A substantial win for liberals in the state President Trump won by the narrowest of margins in November, and ensuring the court's liberal control until at least 2028.
I think that the court has been politicized because my poor colleagues have uniformly made decisions that favor the Democratic Party. And because of that, it's seen as a very political court. You can't say the same for me or Justice Hagedorn or Chief Justice Ziegler.
The earth-shattering money on all sides cannot be ignored, and what it may mean for the future. Musk, George Soros, and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker among the notables. Former Wisconsin Republican Governor Tommy Thompson.
I just think the fact that $100 million was spent on a Supreme Court race is wrong. You know, you could have built a hospital and built a college, you could build an educational building. You could do so much good. And it's all over. I think there has to be some kind of limitations. $100 million, I don't care who you are, that's $50 a vote. Sometime, when is enough enough? Last year was 40 million, this year it's 100 million. What will it be in the next Supreme Court race?
Ken Martin is chair of the Democratic National Committee. He joins us now. Chairman, welcome to Upfront.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So let's talk about what this win means. What does it mean for Democrats? Susan Crawford winning the Supreme Court race here in Wisconsin.
Well, it's a huge victory, of course, for sure. I mean, most importantly, is what it means for Wisconsin, which we now know you have a court that's going to stand up for reproductive rights, stand up for your education system, stand up for, the people of Wisconsin. It was a big victory, of course, a record victory in the sense of how much money was spent. I think at the end of the day, what it means for Democrats, of course, is it's a huge shot in the arm. I believe, as I've said all along, that when you organize everywhere, you can win anywhere, right? You guys know this in Wisconsin. Most of these races have been decided in recent years by a point either way. And the fact that this was a 10-point victory really shows that, I think there's been a huge backlash around the country right now, and particularly in Wisconsin, to Donald Trump and Elon Musk. This was a huge repudiation of both of them. It was a great victory, of course, for Wisconsinites, but certainly a great victory for Democrats and people around the country right now at this moment.
Ben Wickler, the state party chair here in Wisconsin, who ran against you for DNC chair earlier this year, was really front and center in this campaign. Do you credit him with this win?
Well, certainly. I mean, the organization he built on the ground is second to none. It's a wonderful organization. He's built it from the ground up. When he came in, he came over to visit with me in Minnesota. We talked a lot about what we were able to do in that state. And he's just done a great job of building the type of infrastructure that you need to win up and down the ballot. And, I'm very proud of his organization. But, of course, that helped contribute to it. But you also had a spectacular candidate in Susan Crawford, who, kept her focus on, on the court.
Democrats tried to accuse Elon Musk of trying to buy a Supreme Court seat, essentially with his spending. But major liberal billionaires also backed the Crawford campaign as well. So with that same logic, does that mean that they brought their seat on the court?
Yeah, look, I mean, here's what I would say. I mean, there's a lot of outside money that flows into these races, and it shouldn't. I mean, we need major campaign finance overhaul, as both Ben and I have talked about a lot. I mean, the cost of these races it's obscene. I mean, you spent almost $100 million was spent on a judicial race. It's a record in this country, as I mentioned, and it shouldn't be that way. And in the past, frankly, and certainly in Minnesota, we don't have expensive judicial races like you do in Wisconsin, and that's the way it should be.
Democrats felt pretty good after the win in Wisconsin, but there are still challenges across the country. A new Marquette Law School poll shows 63% of voters view the party unfavorably, and that includes 30% of Democrats. So how do you win nationally with a number like that?
Well, we have work to do. As I said, it's the reason I ran for this job. We have to make sure that people know who we are as a Democratic Party, what we're fighting for, and why. At the end of the day, we can't just resist Trump completely and exclusively. We have to do both. I believe we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can give people a sense that we're fighting back against the excesses and the extremes of this administration and the serious damage that they're doing to the American people with their the tariffs, with the cuts, with the tax on Social Security and Medicare, while also giving people a sense of who we are as a Democratic Party and the credible alternative, right? What we would do if we're back in power. And that's what we have to do clearly, because there are many people who used to vote for Democrats who now actually have left the party because they don't believe that we're standing up and fighting for them. They don't believe that we're going to deliver on the promises we made. And that's why we can't just campaign against Donald Trump. We have to do both.
Ken Martin, chair of the Democratic National Committee, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Republican Senator Ron Johnson spent the final days of the campaign trail with Brad Schimmel, crisscrossing the state just months after President Trump's victory here. Senator Johnson joins us now from Washington. Senator, I want to start right there with the results Tuesday night. You know this state incredibly well. How did this happen on Tuesday?
Well, Matt, there's no way to sugarcoat this. It was a disappointing loss. I know Brad Schimmel worked his tail off. A lot of other people did as well. It's just a sad fact, sad reality that more than 600,000 people that voted for President Trump that wanted to see him succeed, either weren't aware or weren't energized or just didn't feel it was important enough to try and make sure that he would be able to be effective for the full 4 years and put at risk a couple of House seats, voter ID, and a bunch of other things as well. So, the good news is we did have the advisory referendum. So I hope the justices were looking at the fact that Wisconsinites overwhelmingly support voter ID because they don't want their legitimate vote canceled out by a fraudulent or illegitimate vote.
I was going to say, you said this on the campaign trail about these Trump voters who stayed home. The Schimmel campaign said it loud and clear, knowing they had to get out. Why do you think these voters stayed home?
I can't explain that. I mean, I give the Democrats credit. They were energized. They're all angry about the fact that President Trump won in November, and I guess that has fired them up. And then they, have renewed anger over Elon Musk as well. Although I think Elon's efforts were very welcome. I think in general they were a net positive. But again, when you don't turn people out and people don't, you can lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink. So. Again, disappointing result.
I was going to say, Democrats are saying this is a strong rebuke on Elon Musk. I mean, you don't believe he helped lose this race for Brad Schimmel?
No, they're angry because President Trump won. They're angry because President Trump is, taking bold, swift, and decisive action to honor the promises he made during the campaign. They don't like it. They don't like his policies. So the left sure seems to get angry and exercised over things, and setting Teslas on fire, attacking Tesla dealerships. So where's the outrage in the legacy and corporate media over that display of domestic terrorism?
Some Republicans within the state are pointing the finger at party leadership after the loss. Is that warranted in your mind? Where do you place the blame?
Listen, I think a lot of people within the party and outside groups work their tail off. In the end, it's up to voters. And again, 1.7 million people were motivated to try and save this country by electing Donald Trump. 600,000 of those individuals, like I said, were either not aware, not paying attention, or just didn't think it was important enough. It's very disappointing.
Broadly, as we look to the future, Senator Tillis said of the Wisconsin results, I think that these elections are going to be proxies or almost like weather devices for figuring out what kind of storms we're going to be up against next year. Is he right on that?
Yeah, listen, I don't think you can place a lot of emphasis on one vote in one particular state. I mean, every state is different. There are different dynamics occurring. I mean, every election has many, many factors that decide who's going to win or lose.
Let's talk about the tariffs, Senator. We're seeing the markets react this afternoon. Where's your level of concern after the president's announcement yesterday?
Well, first of all, I agree with the president that America is not treated fairly by many of our trading partners. I understand his goal. I think President Trump would like a tariff-free world where trade is free and fair. We don't have that. Tariffs are a double-edged sword. I remain concerned. It's interesting as I talk to people in Wisconsin, manufacturers, farmers who could be impacted by this, they also realize it's a double-edged sword, and they understand what President Trump is trying to accomplish and agree with the goals, at least. So again, it's a very complex issue. Right now, all I can do is kind of sit by and listen to the constituents, make sure that Howard Lutnick and the president and his administration are well aware of any kind of retaliation or any kind of pain that this is causing, or how it might make Wisconsin manufacturers less competitive globally. We'll see what are the consequences are. I remain, as the stock market is concerned.
How long should we play this out in the short term before Congress steps in or the administration needs to change course?
Well, again, I think President Trump is well aware of the fact that there's going to be some pain. I don't know what his pain tolerance is. But they're smart people. He ran to make sure that he tamed inflation. I don't think he's going to let this go so far if it starts impacting the price of goods significantly. So, again, he's surrounded by excellent economic advisors, understand the risks, but they also understand what the benefits are. And again, it's a bold and risky move here.
Another busy weekend in Washington. Senator Ron Johnson, Senator, like always, thank you.
Have a great day.
Coming up, the results inside how Susan Crawford won. Marquette Law School poll director Charles Franklin standing by. His new analysis in that new nationwide poll next.